Joining me now, first guest on the program, one half of my regular panel, Nationals MP Keith Pitt. So Keith, you'll have to play the role of the Greens as well today, see how you go with that. Let's begin with Westpac, a meeting today and plenty of pressure on the board. What needs to happen here? Is there a real need for a real senior scalp here, do you think?
Oh, Tom, it's great to be with you and great to be with your viewers. First and foremost, the buck always stops with somebody. Now, obviously, what happens internally with the bank is a matter for them, but the allegations that have been made are horrifying, to be frank, and very, very disturbing. Now, if we look at their prior history, I mean, in 2017, this bank was out moralising about how they wouldn't fund coal mines in Queensland and all of those particular types of social issues, and it would appear that they should have been more focused on what they're doing internally than worrying about those social challenges around the country.
Right, so the buck has to stop with someone. So there needs to be a senior figure that takes responsibility and goes and loses their job?
Well, the bank has a responsibility to shareholders. It has a responsibility to uphold the law, and the allegations that have been made by AUSTRAC, as I've said, are incredibly disturbing. So, clearly that has been referred to the federal court. I don't want to make any particular comments on the matter, but, very clearly, there is a responsibility to shareholders, there's a responsibility to their own employees, there's a responsibility to the community to ensure they do comply with the law, and someone somewhere must have known something.
Right, so and that's what you think we need out of this, and there needs to be confidence that there is genuine responsibility. We're talking about someone or multiple people actually taking responsibility. That's what you're saying?
Tom, the decision will be made by the bank itself. I'm not here to recommend who it might be or where. Obviously, they'll run their own internal processes. But in terms of the confidence in the sector, confidence of shareholders, confidence of those individuals that use that particular bank, I think it would be the right thing to do.
Should Brian Hartzer go?
Well, as I've said, I mean, that's a matter for the bank, for its board, for its shareholders. I don't know the individual, but clearly someone has to take responsibility for what's allegedly happened, and I certainly think that there will be some significant penalties.
Want to play you something from Malcolm Turnbull, of course, not so long ago, the leader of your government, the Prime Minister, and his comments about energy and coal. Have a listen.
We can become a very, very cheap, clean energy economy. We're going to move away from coal. I know there are some people who've got sentimental attachment to that. We've got, huge land mass, great solar resource. That is going to become a big opportunity. We will switch from being a high-cost energy country to being a low-cost energy country and a low-emission energy country.
We've got the government looking at its a hydrogen strategy of some sort, which could mean we one day export hydrogen energy, which could come from renewables one day. So basically an exporter of renewables rather than coal. Is that the future at some stage, and would that be a good one?
Tom, we were an incredibly low cost of energy country up until a few years ago. There have been significant changes, particularly by state governments around some policies which, I've said on this program many times, I just don't agree with. I mean, you can't simply change the entire Australian economy to being one which is reliant on the weather for its energy. You can't just be a daylight-only generating company, so there needs to be balance. There are places where intermittent wind and solar fit quite nicely in terms of what they pick up. I want to congratulate Angus Taylor on the work he's doing right now to get the states to take some responsibility for their decisions and how we ensure there's a reliable and affordable supply into the future. But in terms of hydrogen, I mean, I was at the launch of the CSIRO membrane technology, which allows the transfer of ammonia into almost pure hydrogen, which in my view was a real breakthrough. I mean, you have the capacity to be able to use the existing ammonia logistical chain, which exists around the country right now. I think that there are some practical and real applications for that into the future, and I congratulate the government on the work they're doing.
And that's another avenue away from that issue that you spoke about, right? Intermittent renewables. We know batteries, we know there's the hydro element, and then hydrogen. So this does make that more realistic, doesn't it?
Well, I think there'll always be a mix of generation options, as there has been in the past. We've always used gas, we've used traditional hydro, And I think it comes down to some really practical realities. Where does the energy need to be sourced and distributed? Who's paying? What's the cost? And how do we ensure it's a reliable supply?
And you mentioned just before that Westpac shouldn't be talking about social issues in terms of, for example, coal funding and loans and so on. What we've heard from bank bosses in terms of evidence is that it's about financial risk for them off into the future, and that financial risk is also something that APRA and ASIC is directly telling them they need to take account of. Is that fair enough?
Well, Tom, what I've said is that clearly their focus needs to be much more strongly on what they're doing internally and ensuring that they are complying with the law given the allegations that have currently been made. And I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, but you spoke about the social issues they were getting involved with in terms of coal financing. That's also financial risk. That's my point.
Well, those are questions to be answered, but I think their shareholders would want them to be focused on compliance with the law, delivery of a return for them, ensuring they get the right balance in terms of where their investments are. But the point that I'm making is they were very clear about announcing their social policies, but now we find there are very serious allegations on a very disturbing front made by Austrac, and I think that definitely shows they need to focus more internally on ensuring they comply with the law.
News today of the refugee resettlement plan. The government wants to have more than half of refugees coming to the country settled into the regions. Would they be welcome there in Bundaberg?
Tom, our country's been built on migrants and immigrants. I mean, you've only got to go up and down the Queensland coastline and you'll find lots of names that come from a heritage which is Italian or German or European or any other location, to be frank. So, look, I think we do need to do something about the numbers which are moving into our capital cities. The regions do need to maintain their population in order to maintain their strength. I mean, in 2017, we had 170,000 individuals move into Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane alone. Now, that obviously puts a lot of pressure on existing infrastructure, which is very hard to catch up on. And once again, we've had some good announcements on bringing forward the federal budget and funding for infrastructure around the country this week. So, look, I think it's a good thing, and I look forward to seeing it be successful.
And could it be a real burn? When we're talking specifically about refugees, there'll need to be support elements in place for all of this, but there have been some fantastic sort of individual stories covered in the media about families that have resettled and really got their roots into local communities. They're not sitting there thinking, oh, I can't wait to get to Sydney.
But that's exactly what happens, Tom. People become invested in their local community, their kids go to local schools, they may meet a local boy or girl and do what happens naturally, I guess. And certainly there's been some great stories around the Dharmas right now. I know that there's been a number of families into areas down in Victoria, around the Mallee and Mildura, which has been a real success story, because there are locations in regional Queensland and regional Australia which are desperate for workers of particular types. And businesses you just can't build businesses without staff. So they are key to the growth and our economic growth into the future for the regions. And I think this will be a successful program.
Wanted to ask finally about the China threat. So the former ASIO boss, Duncan Lewis, is talking about the Chinese government seeking to take over Australia's political system through insidious foreign interference operations. It's pretty disturbing from someone with a good knowledge of what's happening here.
I think all of us as members and senators need to be aware of those individuals who are out there looking to influence, regardless of which country they may or may not be from. I mean, we are lobbied by all sorts of individuals, whether that is people from foreign nations, people with an agenda, people who want things to happen, in their own backyard. So we all need to do what we have to as members and senators on balance, but we do need to be very cautious about where that influence comes from. And look, I think the commentary around the MPs and senators this week in regards to China and the visas that weren't actually allocated has been a fairly sensible debate, and certainly it's been a pretty good approach from both Mr Patterson and Mr Hastings.
Have you been lobbied by anyone with links to the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, of course. I mean, we all get lobbied by individuals from different countries, and it doesn't really matter which one it is. We sit and listen to our neighbours and to those people which we trade with, and it's an important trading partner. I've never taken up that opportunity, and I probably won't into the future. I haven't done so in the past in terms of a sponsored visit. I've been to China a number of times in previous portfolios because that was the role. And, obviously at $170 billion plus in two-way trade, they're a very important partner for Australia.
Yeah. So is that the pitch you've had? Come to China, we'll take you on a trip, it'll be fantastic, you can see what it's all about, and you thought that there were perhaps invisible strings attached?
Tom, there's any number of approaches from different individuals or organisations about trying to put forward information which is most likely valuable as a member and senator. You do have to inform yourself about what happens in other countries. We have to act in the national interest, and to do that we do need to be well informed. But that's a choice for individuals. To date I haven't taken up those opportunities. There's been a fair bit going on in my own electorate, mate, I've got to tell you, and right now we've got fires just like every other part of regional Australia.
Yeah. But were any of these approaches the sort of ones where you thought, I might need to ask a security agency, this feels like they might want to influence policy or influence my opinion?
Well, I'm always a cautious individual when we are dealing with foreign nations. We have to be very mindful that we deal with them respectfully. They're all important in terms of what happens around the world. And we know that right now what is happening in terms of world affairs and foreign affairs, things have changed. They're not the same as they were even 5 or 10 years ago. We need to be part of that conversation. We need to do that in a respectful manner, and we need to continue to keep our trade ties with important trade partners, because trade is what drives jobs into this country. I mean, 1 in 5 jobs across this nation are reliant on trade. So, this is why we're out. We are negotiating, signing up to RCEP. This is why we've done any number of trade agreements with China and Japan and South Korea. We've taken Australia's trade from around 20-odd% up to 70-odd% under free trade agreements.
We'll leave it there, although I might just add, Keith Pitt, I'm wondering if you're trying to do your bit for Bundaberg tourism. You've gone from the farm picture to the wharf of some sort. Where's the picture taken behind you?
Oh, this is the Torquay Pier. It's one of the smaller ones at Harvey Bay. You've obviously got the very large pier down at Urangan, which is famous, very well known. I'd say to all your viewers, Tom, come up for a visit. Christmas is coming. It's a fantastic place to visit up here in central Queensland. Any time of year, we've got everything you might need.
Indeed, a nice Bundaberg with a bit of ginger beer on ice on the pier there. Sounds pretty good. Keith Pitt, thank you.